Okay, kiddies, today we're talking X-Men. So, ever since Disney acquired Fox and continued their ongoing quest to create a virtual monopoly over the entire damn world, one of the few sources of comfort of that have been that we might get some decent superhero movies out of it. Look, the world's falling apart. I'm taking what joy I can get. Let me have this. Please, let me have this. And of the two big properties, X-Men and Fantastic Four, the one that's getting the most buzz, the most people curious in how they're going to take it, has been the X-Men. Probably because we've actually seen the X-Men adapted fairly well before, as opposed to the Fantastic Four. Those movies still hurt me. But either way, I have my own thoughts on how Marvel might adapt the Merry Mutants, and thought it'd be fun to just kind of share my idle musings with the interwebs. So, let's get started. First decision you need to make is, how are you going to introduce them? There are two basic ways to do this. You can start at the beginning with the Xavier School opening up and recruiting the first class. And for my take, you go with the original five if you're going this way. Cyclops, Jean Grey, Angel, Beast. Personally, I'd say keep him in his human form and then have him go blue and furry later. There's some story possibilities there. And finally, Iceman, who, yes, we're going to have him eventually come out as being gay. Marvel's went with that. It's opened the character up to some interesting places. And it's 2020. Gay people exist. Let's reflect reality. So you can start at the beginning. Or you can start media res. The X-Men have been around for a while. They're an established team. They've been fighting for a world that hates and fears them for a decent amount of time. This is the approach the Fox movies took and had Wolverine and Rogue as the viewpoint characters for our introduction, the audience surrogates. The 90s animated series did this as well, with Jubilee serving as the audience surrogate. Benefit there is basically you can hit the ground running. You don't need to establish too much about the world. You don't need to show the team really being recruited. You can just hit the ground running. Now, of the two options, I personally would go with the first. We start with the first team. We go back to the beginning. The reasoning being, first off, again, Fox did the start media res opening. Regardless of your opinions, they've done that. They've put that out there. And it's best to just kind of differentiate ourselves right from the start. Secondly, most adaptations don't go for opening at the start. So we're setting ourselves up as something different. And I guarantee you, from the comic nerd set at Comic-Con, showing, the characters in the original blue and gold uniforms, or black and gold if you want to go with that because it'll look better on screen. That's getting a pop. So, if I'm in charge in some imaginary world of making the X-Men movie, and for the purpose of this thought experience, I am. We're going with starting at the beginning. We're recruiting the original five. Xavier School's just starting. And this has the added benefit of neatly sidestepping an issue that people seem to get hung up on that I don't really see the problem. That being where have mutants been for the past X number of years in the MCU. Really, I think just we've always been here. You just haven't seen us because it hasn't been important. Works fine. Same way we didn't see the Ancient One was fighting Loki's invasion in New York. We just didn't see it because the Avengers weren't in that part of it. Also, the leader of one of the major mutant factions is a telepath who doesn't have too many compunctions about messing with people's memories. Seriously, look up Gabriel Summers, Vulcan, and read a bit of his backstory. Xavier's a jerk, man. Xavier is a jerk. Anyway, so we're going with that. Next question is, who's going to be our central figure, at least for this first movie? And the way I see it, there are 3 options, and I'm going to go in order of my personal choice from worst. I don't want to say worst because they all work, but we're ending on what I'd go with. All right? So the first choice is Iceman. Now, Bobby Drake, Iceman, has always been characterized as the kid of the group. The others were about 17, 18. He was like 14 or 15. They were the seniors. He was a freshman. Savvy? And he is a good choice if you really want to emphasize the fun of being a mutant, the fun of being an X-Man, the fun of being a superhero. The Xavier Institute is Hogwarts, basically. Look, guys, I know, giant robots, scary, but giant robots, and we all have superpowers, and we're wearing costumes, and isn't this cool? I mean, it's serious, I get that, but it's cool, right? He's a good choice for the spectacle X-Men movie, for the let's have fun and go on adventures and have wacky hijinks and be teenagers X-Men. If that interests you, pick up the book X-Men First Class by Jeff Parker. I think you can find it on Comixology. Marvel is producing these little digest-sized versions of it. And it's a really fun, charming read. It's really quite good. Worth checking out. The next choice is Jean Grey. Now, the way you do her is go with the opening from the issue number 1. The 4 boys have been with the school for a while, and Jean is the newest student, the last to be recruited. So you have the benefit of her playing kind of a viewpoint introductory character. And you have kind of something fun to play with where she has, at least from what we see of her at the beginning, probably the closest thing to a normal life of any of them. So that would be basically her story arc, adjusting to this crazy new world she's a part of and coming to embrace her role as a member of the X-Men. Now that's a very good take. The book X-Men Season 1 by Dennis Hopeless went with that, and it is my favorite. It is probably my favorite retelling of the origins of the X-Men. So give that a read if you want. But she's running up against, my personal tastes. And the third option is my favorite member of the X-Men. Scott Summers, the man called Cyclops. Now hear me out. Scott is kind of a dick. He's serious. He's stoic. He's not good at emotion. He's not good at interpersonal relationships. He's very much a soldier in a way a lot of characters aren't when he becomes an adult. And the journey of how he gets to that point is fascinating. I think it's a good through line. So to understand so now I'm going to do something, people who aren't comic book fans are going to groan at. We're talking continuity. We're talking backstory. Bear with me, I'm going somewhere with this. So to start things off, you need to understand something. By definition, Marvel superheroes have shitty lives when compared to normal people. We good? We good. Now, Scott Summers has a shitty life by the standards of a Marvel superhero. Here's how his story begins. When Scott is about 6 or 7, he is flying home from a camping trip in Alaska with his loving parents and his little brother Alex. The plane crashes. There is one working parachute. Their parents bundle Alex and Scott up into that and basically get them to jump out of the plane, try and save themselves. Scott's parents seemingly die in the crash. People who read the comics know what was revealed later on. We're not going to talk about that right now. And during the fall, Alex and Scott are separated. Upon crashing, Scott falls into a coma for a year, whereon he is separated from Alex and is led to believe he is dead. Scott is firmly established to blame himself for this. At the very least, being separated from Alex. So he's carrying that. Following this, Scott is sent to an orphanage in Nebraska where he is abused and isolated for years. At some point in his teens, around probably 15 or 16, shortly after his mutant powers manifest and it is revealed that he can't control them. The part of his brain that would have handled that was damaged in the crash. So he has to wear ruby quartz, visors, or sunglasses to keep from murdering everyone he looks at. During this time, Scott is forcibly, essentially kidnapped by a criminal named Jack Winters, who forces him into committing crimes for him. Eventually, Charles Xavier intercedes, and Scott is taken into his care. In the process, Jack Winters dies. So, as you can see, a recurring element of Scott's life is when I'm not in control of what's going around me, people I love die. Or people get hurt, or bad things happen. And because that all happened when I wasn't in control, it is my fault. That is how Scott Summers' mind works. He fundamentally doesn't see value in himself. Inherently, he sees value in himself as he's useful to others. That's why his role in the X-Men is so important to him and why it's difficult for him to walk away. But I'm digressing. I'm probably going to make a video just talking about my love of Cyclops and how his characters have evolved at some point down the line. Anyways, for the purpose of what you need to understand, Scott Summers is an abused child. He's an abused child who becomes a hero and a leader of heroes. And I think that journey is something worth telling. X-Men Apocalypse kind of tried to do that, but it's hung up on the fact that we don't really see any suffering in Scott's life. He just seems like kind of a troubled kid and that he gets into trouble. I have been basically abused and or abandoned by everyone around me since I can remember, considering he doesn't remember anything before the crash. Again, Scott's life sucks to the point where I was recruited into a paramilitary organization is his happy ending. Yes, at some point these movies will grapple with the fact that the X-Men are essentially child soldiers. I would go there because, as I've said before, Charles Xavier is a dick. Anyways, one of the things that you run into trouble with the mutant metaphor is that a lot of the time, it's you're kind of left with the impression that, yeah, okay, world that hates and fears him, but it's kind of worth it, ain't it? I mean, Storm can control the weather. That's cool. Iceman can do all the turn to ice and go rolling, flying, going around on all these ice shields and do all those cool things. Angel can fly, be super strong. Jean can read minds and telekinesis and do all this cool stuff. And like, there are benefits. There are really cool benefits to being a mutant for a lot of characters. And I think that it kind of harms the inherent tragedy of being a mutant in the Marvel Universe. Characters like Scott and Rogue show the flip side of that. What if your powers really don't add to your life? What if they take away from it? What if they prevent you from having options other people would have, from opportunities other people would have? Because Scott and Rogue both really can't function outside the X-Men. Rogue is obvious, she can't have physical contact with another living being. When people are social animals, and we thrive on human contact and physical affection. It's something that's very endemic to us as a species. Overall. And Scott's a little less obvious, but he's cut off from first off, he's functionally colorblind. Everything he sees is red. Like, there's a joke at one point where when he's temporarily gets his powers under control, takes off his glasses and, so Jean's actually a redhead. Neat. And, something as simple as, not knowing the hair color or the eye color of the woman you love. That's kind of sad. Also, there's kind of a recurring thing, gag, where most times when he gets his powers under control temporarily, never lasts because, God forbid, at least someone will react to the fact that he has beautiful eyes. I just find that amusing. But anyways, similar to Rogue, Scott's cut off from a huge part of how humans form connections. Eye contact. There have been studies on this. There's a reason visual shorthand for people falling in love is just staring into each other's eyes longingly. And Scott can't have that. It actually, to some extent, probably goes away to explain why so many of his relationships are built around, for lack of a better word, professional relationships. He's very much, less so with the original five, but for the most part, his relationships with the other X-Men are all very flavored by the fact that he is Cyclops, leader of the X-Men, first and a friend second. And so that's just, the burdens of command. He could be forced to order any one of them to go off on a hugely dangerous mission at any point. And, that weighs on him, obviously. There's a wonderful scene in a series called Champions by Mark Waid, wherein a version of Cyclops from this period of time, the original five, as a teenager, is brought forward to the present day, and he's currently teaming up with a group of other teenage superheroes. It makes sense in context, I promise. Sort of. Kind of. Not really. Look, it leads to some good stories, so you roll with it. But during one issue, he's hit by an attack from a villain that causes his emotions to spring lively out of control. And near the end of the issue, it causes Scott to be possibly the most honest and open he's ever been. One of the X-Men, one of the members of the Champions says, basically, like, we like you. We're going to make sure nothing happens. And Scott asks, why? He knows what people say about him. He's too stiff. He's too serious. He's weird. He doesn't quite fit. And it's because he's constantly has to be under control. Because he's not in control of his powers. The sunglasses are. The combat visor is. And if he slips for a second, buildings are destroyed, lives are ruined, people he loves gets hurt or killed or taken away. And he carries that burden. Now that's how he ends by saying that his powers don't give him anything. They just take and take and take. Now that's how Scott views his powers and the visor and the sunglasses as a teenager. We're going to talk about another series real quick. There's a book called Academy X. It's out in trade as New Mutants Academy X. That was built around young mutants training at the Xavier School. And in it, there's a scene I love between Cyclops and a character named Surge. Now, Surge's power is pretty much what you guess from the names. He generates and projects electricity. So he can use it in blasts and to move forward at very fast speeds. Only the issue is C can't regulate her output. So she's forced to wear these very big, clunky, ugly gauntlets. And at one point, she's very upset about this. That, she can't hold a boy's hand. She can't, just parts of her life are cut off from her. And she's frustrated with not making progress. And Scott comes to her. And this is adult Scott Summers, where, in a lot of ways, his arc is that the person kind of gets lost in the role. He becomes Cyclops, leader of the X-Men, and Scott Summers' person kind of fades away and dies. But here he talks to her and he tells her, give us a chance. You might be able to learn to control your powers. A lot of people do. And maybe you never will. And that's okay. I didn't. I have to wear this visor every minute of every day of my life. It's ugly. I know that. But it takes my mutation and turns it from something harmful into something useful. It lets me do something good with what I've been given. And that's worthwhile. And I think telling that story of someone who ultimately comes to accept themselves in that way, I think there's something worthwhile there. Now, next question is, the villains. And look, I know it's obvious, but Magneto has to be involved. I know he's in every bloody X-Men movie, but he's the central antagonist of the series for a reason. And I say antagonist, not villain, because, he's a little more nuanced than that. But you need to set up the conflict between Xavier and Magneto, the X-Men and the Brotherhood early on, because it's a driving force. Peaceful coexistence and gaining acceptance and building connection versus violent revolution. That's a key theme of the X-Men, in my opinion, and something you need to establish very early on. Now, I don't think you should have Xavier be the only, Magneto be the only threat the X-Men are facing. So what I'd like to do is have some government force, either SHIELD, the FBI, CIA, whatever, be acting to either get mutants under control or wiped out. Because here's the thing. I hear people complaining about, people being afraid of mutants when they're okay with, like, the Fantastic Four or Spider-Man or the Avengers. It doesn't make sense. Here's the difference. The Fantastic Four, the Avengers, those are freaks. Those are accidents. Mutants get their powers from birth. They're the next step of evolution. They're here to replace us. They are creatures who are inherently superior in some way. And that's scary. And you need to establish that is there, that there are people who feel that way. Because to some extent, Magneto needs to make sense. Magneto needs to be tempting. Because it's quicker, it's easier, and there's a very natural part of people that wants to answer, injustice strongly. And, having that temptation, having, Scott and Warren or the X-Men, considering it and coming through and taking the longer road, the harder road, it makes it more powerful. So, yeah, those are my very idle, disjointed musings on how you might want to treat an X-Men movie. As I said, I'm probably going to want to do a video just talking about Cyclops in general, because this has reminded me how much I love that character, and he's not particularly popular, and I'd like to share my thoughts on why I personally love him at some point. Anyways, I'm Matt McClegg, and good talking to you.